Just turn around and leave me. The tear in my eye drops on the floor alongside my speed. My knees are drenching in the blood I feel just to get here. When I look around me, everything I had went up in flames.
Okay. We'll go ahead and finish out the intro music here real quick. And we'll get started on the next book. And it's a full-length book.
When I look around me, everything I had went up in flames. My lonely way. I never pray to God anymore. I'd rather no one hurt me.
Okay, good enough. So that is 2 minutes of the music. I don't know how long that song is. I don't remember. I have to look again. But here we go. All right. So the next book is Old Republic Fatal Alliance. I have it in PDF format, and it's 231 pages in that format. Hopefully there are not too many typos in this one. There were a ton in Red Harvest. It was annoying. But it also doesn't tell me exactly what the timeline is for this. I would have to go to Wikipedia and look at that, but we're still in the 3,600 years before the Battle of Yavin era, ballpark anyway. So, all right. So we have a prologue first called Wild Space. The Light Star cruiser looked deceptively insignificant against the backdrop of the galaxy. To the keen eye of a pirate, however, it displayed several desirable qualities. No Imperial or Republic markings, only moderate weaponry and shielding. A crew compartment barely large enough to hold a dozen people. No escort or accompanying vessels. "It's your choice, Captain," hissed a guttural voice into Jet Nebula's ear. Jet Nebula. "But don't take too long about it. Our friend here isn't going to sit still forever." The smuggler, calling himself Jet Nebula, enjoyed keeping his first mate on tenterhooks. He harbored no ill feelings about the mutiny in and of itself. The moment the Auriga fire stumbled across something really valuable, a takeover attempt had been inevitable. He had hired Shinko, knowing exactly that, and lost barely a minute's sleep since. Dealing with scum was part of the job. He didn't like needless violence, though. The snub nose of a blaster digging into Jet's side was pure overkill. "Well," Shinko prompted him in Rhodese as he pretended to dither. "Keep your shirt on," Jet said in mock protest. "We only interdicted them a minute ago. It's way too soon to plot another jump." "Just don't take any chances," Shinko said, emphasizing his point with another jab of the blaster. "I'd be glad we don't want your ship as well." Something heavy creaked to Jet's right. The boxy shape of Clunker swayed into view, dented and rusty, photoreceptors glowing bright. Jet shook his head minutely, and the droid backed out of sight again. "Don't make me ask twice," Shinko said. "All right, then." Jet took the captain's seat and punched the comm active. "Since you put it so nicely, Jet's see who these guys are before we steal the hide off their backs. The Star Cruiser's running lights blinked and flickered against the black. Its systems were still settling after their sudden wrench from hyperspace, but Jet felt sure the comm was working by now. All ears aboard would be straining to hear what the rugged ship hanging off their bows had to say. He resorted to short, simple phrases that had served him well enough in the past. "You're nicked, my beauty. Stand by for boarding." "Negative," came the immediate reply. Male, brusque, and human. "Just most likely." "We do not recognize your authority." That was a new one. Who in their right mind would invest any authority in the likes of us? "You're a privateer. You work for the Republic." Now that simply isn't true. Not anymore, anyway, Jet thought. "We're humble grifters of an independent set, and you happen to have stumbled across our patch. Submit easily, and I'll see that my bloodthirsty first mate doesn't blast you all on sight." "That won't happen. We're on a diplomatic mission." "To whom? From where? If I had a credit for every time someone tried that line, I wouldn't be talking. You wouldn't be talking to me now." There was a long pause. "All right, then. What will it cost for you to let us go?" Jet looked at Shinko, who was calling the shots. Shinko's true employers were the Hutts, and sometimes a bribe was worth as much as booty after the cartels took their cut. The Rhodian shook his head. "You're clear out of luck, mate," Jet told the person on the other end of the comm. "Best vent those airlocks smartish. We're coming in and don't want to scuff the merchandise any more than we have to." The Star Cruiser had nothing to say to that. Shinko barked into a communicator as Jet brought the sublights into play. "Feck, Gels, get ready for action." The two Celestins were part of Shinko's treacherous lot, and Jet wouldn't mind if they paid the price for the mutineers' haste. Jet had a strong feeling the cruiser wasn't going to give up lightly. Its lines were too lean, its hull too polished. The name on its starboard side, the only ID it was sporting, said Cinzia in bold black letters, recently affixed. That showed pride. No, the owners of this ship might not be above offering a bribe to continue on their way, but they wouldn't roll over easily. Few did these days. With the Empire and the Republic still at each other's throats, lacking but a declaration to call their squabbling an honest war, people were taking the law into their own hands. There was so much to lose and so little to gain on every front. So much for the Treaty of Coruscant, and so much for avoiding unnecessary bloodshed, he thought, reminded of Feck and Gels. Be it red or green, blood was all the same. The less spilled around him, the smaller the chance it would be his one day. "What are we going to tell our former bosses when we haul in empty?" "That's not my problem," gloated Shinko. "On Flimsy, you're still captain of the Auriga Fire. It's your job to come up with an excuse the Republic will believe. I'll be long gone before then, with the credits." True to form, then, the Rhodian was planning to stiff Jet at both ends of the deal. That changed everything. Jet glanced at Clunker, who was standing innocently in front of the entrance to the cockpit. No one would get in past him if push came to shove. More important, no one would get out. Barely had the Auriga Fire closed half the distance between the two ships when Jet's misgivings about the cruiser were violently justified. A scattering of red lights danced across the instrument panels. A buzzer harshly sounded. Jet studied the display for a split second, making absolutely certain of what he was seeing, before raising every shield to full and punching the sublights to maximum. The Auriga Fire rolled edge on to the cruiser, and Shinko staggered backward. Clunker caught him, deftly twisting the blaster out of the Rhodian's grasp as he did so. At that moment, the Star Cruiser that should have been their prize exploded, sending a blast of pure white light through every viewport, screen, and shield. Jet had done more than just back the ship away. He had covered his eyes, and now he peered warily through his fingers at instruments gone completely haywire. There was barely anything left where the Cinzia had been. Thuds and clangs registered on the hull as bits of the star cruiser rocketed by. Shinko was barking into his communicator again, quick on the uptake, but not quick enough by half. Who fired? Who fired? Who ordered you to fire? No one did, Jet said. The ship blew itself up, and if I hadn't caught the neutrino spike from the drives before they went, we'd have been toasted too. Shinko rounded on him as though he'd planned this all along. I should shoot you right here. With what, mate? Jet nodded at Clunker, who pointed the Rhodian's own blaster into his chest. Jet enjoyed the confusion nakedly displayed on his mate's green, leathery face. Let's start this again, shall we? We work for the Hutts now. I get that. One master's as good as any other, provided the cut's the same. But we all get equal shares in that cut, right? Or I tell the crew who will be spoiling for a fight they just missed. They won't be happy that they were about to rob some of them. You were about to rob some of them. And I tell Clunker here, who badly needs another oil bath, to tighten his grip on that trigger and send you after the crew of that ship, whatever dim part of the creation they inhabit now. Get it? And it looks like we are in an ad, or we're about to enter an ad. Not sure, though. Well, anyway. Yeah, it says we're in an ad. I don't know. Twitch is weird. Sometimes it says we're in an ad and we're not, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. I'm going to keep on going. Acceptance replaced anxiety on Shinko's face. His hands came up. Here now, Captain, there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Perhaps you'd like to clarify then. Sure, sure. You'll get your share. We all will. I never intended it otherwise. And the Republic? We'll sort them out together, like. It wouldn't be fair to leave it all up to you. I'm relieved to hear that, lad. Jet nodded at Clunker, who flipped the blaster over and handed it back to its owner. While I'm captain of this ship, as written on flimsy plast, Barabel hide, or whatever, I expect a certain degree of civility and common purpose. So long as I have that, we're all going to get along fine. He swiveled around to face the instruments, confident that Clunker would stop anything untoward happening behind him, and confident also that the Rhodian was smart enough to recognize a compromise when he saw one. Jet didn't mind who paid him, just like the Hutts didn't care who handed them their treasure, so long as it was theirs. It all came out in the wash for those left standing. Let's see what remains of our sorry friend out there. The debris field was expanding fast. Sensors tracked the largest chunks, many of which were human-sized or even bigger. That surprised him. A drive blowout usually left only slag and dust. That looks like part of the forward section, said Shinko, leaning over Jet to point at a screen. No life signs. No witnesses, said the Rhodian with satisfaction. That's normally our job, said Jet, although he had never killed a single person he'd robbed in all his years of pirating, not after he'd robbed them. Anyway, broken a few hearts, sure, and busted a few heads, but nothing worse. Don't think they were doing it for us. Why did they do it then? Jet shrugged. That's the billion credit question. Shinko rubbed his chin, making a dry rasping sound with his fingertips. Now that the situation between them was resolved, he had returned to being a proper mate. He had the makings of a good one when greed didn't get in the way. Otherwise, Jet would never have taken him on in the first place. They had something aboard, something they didn't want us to get a hold of. Something worth more than their own lives? Jet turned to meet Shinko's slitted eyes. That sounds pretty valuable to me. Even in pieces, maybe. Exactly what I was thinking. Jet indicated the co-pilot's seat. Strap yourself in and take control of the tractor beam. Let's see what we can find. The Auriga fire came about and began scouring the remains of the ship whose journey they had intercepted. A niggling feeling troubled Jet Nebula as he did so. It felt like guilt, and he told himself not to give in to it. He hadn't killed the crew of the Cinzia. They had pulled that trigger all by themselves. It was just hard luck that their path had crossed his, and his good fortune to be breathing afterward. If his fortune continued to hold, he might yet make a profit from this deep space run, and then, finally, he could hire a slightly more reputable brand of scum and get back into smuggling again. Some days were better than others. Maybe this was one of them. He told himself that with all the conviction he could muster, which was plenty for a man in his trade. What could possibly go wrong? And that's the end of the prologue. Uh, okay. And now we get into chapter 1. So bear with me just a sec. I'm just going to see how long the chapters are. Not too long. I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 1. Um, and that'll be at a total of about an hour of reading, which is about all my voice can handle. So we're at about 35 minutes right now total. So, all right. So part 1, chapter 1, vested interests. Shigar Konshi followed the sound of blaster fire through Coruscant's old districts. He never stumbled, never slipped, never lost his way, even through lanes that were narrow and crowded with years of detritus that had settled slowly from the levels above. Cables and signs swayed overhead, hanging so low in places that Shigar was forced to duck beneath them. Tall and slender, with one blue chevron on each cheek, the Jedi apprentice moved with grace and surety surprising for his 18 years. At the core of his being, however, he seethed. Master Nickel Mobile's decision had cut no less deeply for being delivered by hologram from the other side of the galaxy. The High Council finds Shigar Konshi unready for Jedi trials. The decision had shocked him, but Shigar knew better than to speak. The last thing he wanted to do was convey the shame and resentment he felt in front of the council. "Tell him why," said Grandmaster Satil Shan, standing at his side with hands folded firmly before her. She was a full head shorter than Shigar, but radiated an indomitable sense of self. Even via holoprojector, she made Master Noble, an immense Thespiasian with full ceremonial beard, shift uncomfortably on his tail. "We, that is, the Council, regard your Padawan's training as incomplete." Shigar flushed. "In what way, Master Noble?" His master silenced him with a gentle but irresistible telepathic nudge. "He is close to attaining full mastery," she assured the Council. "I am certain that it is only a matter of time." "A Jedi Knight is a Jedi Knight in all respects," said the distant master. "There are no exceptions, even for you." Master Satil nodded her acceptance of the decision. Shigar bit his tongue. She said she believed in him, so why did she not overrule the decision? She didn't have to submit to the council. If he weren't her Padawan, would she have spoken up for him then? His unsettled feelings were not hidden as well as he would have liked. "Your lack of self-control reveals itself in many ways," said Master Noble to him in a stern tone. "Take your recent comments to Senator Voob regarding the policies of the Resource Management Council. We may all agree that the Republic's handling of the current crisis is less than perfect, but anything short of the utmost political discipline is unforgivable at this time. Do you understand?" Shigar bowed his head. He should have known that the slippery Nemoidian was after more than just his opinion when she'd sidled up to him and flattered him with praise. When the Empire had invaded Coruscant, it had only handed the world back to the Republic in exchange for a large number of territorial concessions elsewhere. Ever since then, supply lines had been strained. That Shigar was right, and the RMC a hopelessly corrupt mess, putting the lives of billions at risk from something much worse than war starvation. War war it's war dash starvation. I don't know. Disease, disillusionment simply didn't count in many circles. Master Noble's forbidding visage softened. You are naturally disappointed, I understand. Know that the Grand Master has spoken strongly in favor of you for a long time, in all respects, but this one do we defer in all respects but this one do we defer to her judgment. She cannot sway our combined decision, but she has drawn our attention. We will be watching your progress closely with high expectations. The holoconference had ended there, and Shigar felt the same conflicted emptiness in the depths of Coruscant as he had then. Unready? High expectations? The Council was playing a game with him, or so it felt, baiting him into back no, batting him backward and forward like a phalanx in a cage. Would he ever be free to follow his own path? Master Satil understood his feelings better than he did. Go for a walk, she had told him, putting a hand on each shoulder and holding his gaze long enough to make sure he understood her intentions. She was giving him an opportunity to cool down, not dismissing him. I need to talk to Supreme Commander Stentors anyway. Let's meet later in Union Cloisters. Yes, master. And so he was walking and stewing. Somewhere inside him he knew had to be the strength to rise above this temporary setback, the discipline to bring the last threads of his talent into a unified design. But on this occasion his instincts were leading him away from stillness, not toward it. The sound of blaster fire grew louder ahead of him. Shigar stopped in an alley that stank like a voodoo's leavings. A swinging light flashed fitfully on and off in the level above, casting rubbish and rot in unwanted relief. An ancient droid watched with blinking red eyes from a filthy niche, rusted fingers protectively gathering wires and servos back into its gaping chest plate. The Cold War with the Empire was being conducted far away from this alley and its unhappy resident, but its effects were keenly felt. If he wanted to be angry at the state of the Republic, he couldn't have chosen a better place for it. The shooting intensified. His hand reached for the grip of his lightsaber. There is no emotion, he told himself. There is only peace. But how could there be peace without justice? What did the Jedi Council, sitting comfortably in their new temple on Tython, know about that? The sound of screams broke him out of his contemplative trance. Between one heartbeat and the next, he was gone, the emerald fire of his lightsaber lingering a split instant behind him, brilliant in the gloom. Laren Moxla paused to tighten the belly strap on her armor. The wretched thing kept coming loose, and she didn't want to take any chances. Until the Justicars got there, she was the only thing standing between the Black Sun gangsters and the relatively innocent residents of Nar's Roost. It sounded like half of it had been shot to pieces already. Satisfied that nothing too vulnerable was exposed, she peered out from cover and hefted her modified snub rifle. Illegal on Coruscant except for elite special forces commandos. It featured a powerful sniper sight, which she trained on the Black Sun safe house. The main entrance was deserted, and there was no sign of the roof guard. That was unexpected. Still, the blaster fire came from within the fortified building. Could it be a trap of some kind? Wishing as always that she had backup, she lowered the rifle and lifted her helmeted head into full view. No one took a pot shot at her. No one even noticed her. The only people she could see were locals running for cover, but for the commotion coming from within, the street could have been completely deserted. Trap or no trap, she decided to get closer. Rattling slightly and ignoring the places where her second-hand armor chafed, Laren hustled low and fast from cover to cover until she was just meters from the front entrance. The weapon's fire was deafening now, and screaming came with it. She tried to identify the weapons, blaster pistols and rifles of several different makes, at least one floor-mounted cannon, 2 or 3 vibro saws, and beneath all that, a different sound. A roaring as if superheated gases jetting violently through as of superheated gases, jetting violent through a nozzle, a flamethrower. No gang she heard of used fire. The risk of a blaze spreading everywhere was too high. Only someone from outside would employ a weapon like that. Only someone who didn't care what damage he left in his wake. Something exploded in an upper room, sending a shower of bricks and dust into the street. Laren ducked instinctively, but the wall held. If it had collapsed, she would have been buried under meters of rubble. Her left hand wanted to count down, and she let it. It felt wrong otherwise. Moving in 3, 2, 1. Silence fell. She froze. It was as though someone had pulled a switch. 1 minute, 9 kinds of chaos had been unfolding inside the building. Now there was nothing. She pulled her hand in, countdown forgotten. She wasn't going anywhere until she knew what had just happened and who was involved. Something collapsed inside the building. Laren gripped her rifle more tightly. Footsteps crunched toward the entrance. 1 set of feet, that was all. She stood up in full view of the entrance, placed herself side on to reduce the target she made, and trained her rifle on the darkened doorway. The footsteps came closer, unhurried, confident, heavy. Very heavy. The moment she saw movement in the doorway, she cried out in a firm voice, "Hold it right there!" Booted feet assumed a standing position, armored shins in metallic gray and green. "Move slowly forward into the light." The owner of the legs took 1 step, then 2, revealing a Mandalorian, so tall his helmeted head brushed the top of the doorway. "That's far enough." "For what?" Laren maintained her cool in the face of that harsh, inhuman voice, although it was difficult. She'd seen Mandalorians in action before, and she knew how woefully equipped she was to deal with one now. "For you to tell me what you were doing in there." The domed head inclined slightly. "I was seeking information." "So you're a bounty hunter." "Does it matter what I am?" It does when you're messing up my people." "You do not look like a member of the Black Sun Syndicate." "I never said I was." "You haven't said you aren't, either." The massive figure shifted slightly, finding a new balance. "I'm seeking information concerning a woman called Lemma Zandret." "Never heard of her." "Are you certain of that?" "I thought I was the one asking questions here." "You thought wrong." The Mandalorian raised 1 arm to point at her. A hatch in his sleeve opened, revealing the flamethrower she'd heard in action earlier. She steadied her grip and tried desperately to remember where the weak points on Mandalorian armor were, if there were any. "Don't," said a commanding voice to her left. Laren glanced automatically and saw a young man in robes standing with 1 hand raised in the universal stop signal. The sight of him dropped her guard momentarily. A sheet of powerful flame roared at her. She ducked, and it seared the air bare millimeters over her head. She let off a round that ricocheted harmlessly from the Mandalorian's chest plate and rolled for cover. It was hard to say what surprised her more, a Jedi down deep in the bowels of Coruscant, or the fact that he had the facial tattoos of the Kifu native, just like she did. Oh, how convenient. They're from the same planet. Shigar, so we've shifted again. Shigar took in the confrontation with a glance. He'd never fought a Mandalorian before, but he had. Oh, this is. Oh, never mind. Never. But he had been about the shift. Um, I'll start that paragraph over. Shigar took in the confrontation with a glance. He'd never fought a Mandalorian before, but he had been carefully instructed in the art by his master. They were dangerous, very dangerous, and he almost had second thoughts about taking this one on. Even together, he and a single battered-looking soldier would hardly be sufficient. Then flame arced across the head of the soldier, and his instincts took over. The soldier ducked for cover with admirable speed. Shigar lunged forward, lightsaber raised to slash at the net that inevitably headed his way. The whine of the suit's jetpack drowned out the angry sizzling of Shigar's blade as he cut himself free. Before the Mandalorian had gained barely a meter of altitude, Shigar force pushed him sideways into the building beside him, thereby crushing off the jet's exhaust vent. With a snarl, the Mandalorian landed heavily on both feet and fired two darts in quick succession, both aimed at Shigar's face. Shigar deflected them and moved closer, dancing lightly on his feet. From his distance, he was at a disadvantage. Mandalorians were masters of ranged weaponry and would do anything to avoid hand-to-hand combat except in one of their infamous gladiatorial pits. If he could get near enough to strike with the soldier maintaining a distracting cover fire, he might just get lucky. A rocket exploded above his head, then another. They weren't aimed at him, but at the city's upper levels. Rubble rained down on him, forcing him to protect his head. The Mandalorian took advantage of that slight distraction to dive under his guard and grip him tight about the throat. Shigar's confusion was complete, but Mandalorians weren't supposed to fight at close quarters. Then he was literally flying through the air, hurled by his assailant's vast physical strength into a wall. He landed on both feet, stunned but recovering quickly, and readied himself for another attack. The Mandalorian ran 3 long steps to his right, leaping 1, 2, 3 onto piles of rubbish, and from there onto a roof. More rockets arced upward, tearing through the ferrocrete columns of a monorail. Slender spears of metal warped and fell toward Shigar and the soldier. Only with the greatest exertion of the force that Shigar could summon was he able to deflect them into the ground around them, where they stuck fast, quivering. "He's getting away!" The soldier's cry was followed by another explosion. A grenade hurled behind the escaping Mandalorian destroyed much of the roof in front of him, and sent a huge black mushroom rising into the air. Shigar dived cautiously through it, expecting an ambush, but found the area clear on the far side. He turned in a full circle, banishing the smoke with one outthrust push. The Mandalorian was gone. Up, down, sideways, there was no way to tell which direction he'd chosen to flee. Shigar reached out through the force. His heart still hammered, but his breathing was steady and shallow. He felt nothing. The soldier became visible through the smoke just steps away, moving forward in a cautious crouch. She straightened and planted her feet wide apart. The snout of her rifle targeted him, and for a moment Shigar thought she might actually fire. "I lost him," he said, unhappily acknowledging their failure. "Not your fault," she said, lowering the rifle. "We did our best." "Where did he come from?" he asked. "I thought it was just the usual Black Sun bust-up," she said, indicating the destroyed building. Then he walked out. "Why did he attack you?" "Beats me. Maybe he assumed I was a Justicar." "You're not one?" "No, I don't like their methods. And they'll be here soon, so you should get out of here before they decide you're responsible for all this." That was good advice, he acknowledged to himself. The bloodthirsty militia controlling the lower levels was a law unto itself, one that didn't take kindly to incursions on their territory. "Let's see what happened here first," he said, moving toward the smoke-blackened doorway with lightsaber at the ready. "Why? It's not your problem." Shigar didn't answer that. Whatever was going on here, neither of them could just walk away from it. He sensed that she would be relieved not to be heading into the building alone. Together they explored the smoking, shattered ruins. Weapons and bodies lay next to one another in equal proportions. Clearly the inhabitants had taken up arms against the interloper, and in turn every one of them had died. That was grisly, but not surprising. Mandalorians didn't disapprove of illegals per se, but they did take poorly to being shot at. On the upper floor, Shigar stopped, sensing something living among the carnage. He raised a hand, cautioning the soldier to proceed more slowly, just in case someone thought they were coming to finish the job. She glided smoothly ahead of him, heedless of danger and with her weapon at the ready. He followed soundlessly in her wake, senses tingling. They found a single survivor huddled behind a shattered crate. Natolan with blaster burns down much of one side and a dart wound in his neck, lying in a pool of his own blood. The blood was spreading fast. He looked up as Shigar bent over him to check his wounds. What Shigar couldn't tourniquet, he could cauterize, but he would have to move fast to have any chance at all. Dow Striver, the Natolan's voice was a guttural growl, not helped by the damage to his throat. Come out of nowhere. The Mandalorian, said the soldier. Is that who you're talking about? The Natolan nodded. Dow Striver. Wanted what we had. Wouldn't give it to him. The soldier took off his helmet. Her helmet. She was surprisingly young, with short dark hair, a strong jaw, and eyes as green as Shigar's lightsaber. Most startling was the distinctive black markings of Clan Moxla tattooed across her dirty cheeks. What did you have exactly? She pressed the Natolan. The Natolan's eyes rolled up in his head. Sinzia, he coughed, spraying dark blood across the front of her armor. Sinzia. And what is... And that is? She asked, leaning close to his as his breathing failed. Hold on, help's coming. Just hold on. Shigar leaned back. There was nothing he could do, not without a proper med pack. The Natolan had said his last. I'm sorry, he said. You've no reason to be, she said, staring down at her hands. He was a member of the Black Sun, probably a murderer himself. Does that make him evil? Lack of food might have done that, or medicine for his family, or 1,000 other things. Bad choices don't make bad people, right. But what else do we have to go on down here? Sometimes you have to make a stand, even if you can't tell who the bad guys are anymore. A desperately fatigued look crossed her face. Then, and Shigar thought that he understood her a little better. Justice was important, and so was the way people defended it, even if that meant fighting alone sometimes. My name is Shigar, he said in a calming voice. Nice to meet you, Shigar, she said, brightening. And thanks. You probably saved my life back there. I can't take any credit for that. I'm sure he didn't consider either of us worthy opponents. Or maybe he worked out that we didn't know anything about what he was looking for in the safe house. Lemazandret. That was the name he used on me. Ever heard of it? No, not Sinzia either. She rose to her feet in one movement and cocked her rifle onto her back. I would say maybe locked her rifle? I don't know. Laren, by the way. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Our clans were enemies once, Shigar said. Ancient history is the least of our troubles. We'd better move out before the Justicars get here. He looked around him at the Natolan, the other bodies in the wrecked building. Dow Striver, Lemazandret, Sinzia. I'm going to talk to my master, he said. She should know there's a Mandalorian making trouble on Coruscant. All right, she said, hefting her helmet. Lead the way. You're coming with me? Never trust a Conchi. That's what my mother always said. And if we're going to stop a war between Dow Striver and the Black Sun, we have to do it right. Right? He barely caught... We have to do it right, right? He barely caught her smile before it disappeared behind her helmet. Right, he said. And that is the end of that chapter. I don't know why they're wasting a whole blank page in between chapters for some reason. And that is about as much as my voice can take tonight. So I'm going to leave it off there. We'll start on chapter 2, maybe 2 and 3 next time. Yeah, that'll be it. Let's see who's around. Yeah, you know what? I'm not gonna raid anybody tonight. I'm not feeling up to it. So I will see you tomorrow night for some Fallout New Vegas / New California. See you then.